the email, and she did everything necessary to delete it from the servers of the DNA. So this is something that I consider to be extremely serious. Second issue, the issue of Romanian prisons and detention centers. I will call them very simply, I will call them a gulag. Gulag is a Soviet-era term that describes very well the situation in Romania. Of course, the authorities are reporting and they are putting out a lot of interesting press releases, but I brought you pictures. It's interesting for you to see, and I will pass it along the table. The conditions and the real pictures from Romanian detention centers and prisons. As I said, I was 6 months and a half in one of those detention centers, and we were on 12 meters square, 8 persons. Mr. Fotre mentioned before the case of Dan Adamescu. Just to be very blunt and to very clear, because the Romanian propaganda already started to attack me and attack my presence here today with you on these grounds. I never met Mr. Adamescu. I never had any business with Mr. Adamescu. We were never in contact. We had nothing in common, let's call it. There is one thing that we have in common. Still. In January 2015, when I was arrested, and I was placed on solitary confinement in one section called maximum security, section 4, one of the guards came to me and he told me, you know what, this bed that you're staying in is the bed where Adamescu was put when he was in pre-trial arrest. So the only connection between me and Adamescu, or the death of what happened, or the story, this horrible story that happened, is the fact that we shared actually the same bed in the same gulag conditions. I will add something to this case. When the lawyers asked in December 2016 the release of Dan Adamescu, he was in coma. He was not able to communicate in December. And the DNA came to the judge and said, no, we cannot do this because there are two things he did not show. Why I'm mentioning this? Because in 98% of the cases, this is what they are claiming. One, the fact that we have no proof he changed his behavior and he understood the acts he committed. Second, that he did not show any sign that he regrets his acts. So for you to better understand this, we are talking about the inquisition that is taking place in Romania. If you find a better term to describe, be my guest. But the fact that you have to acknowledge and you have to admit the facts that you are accused of, even if you declare yourself innocent, and then you can be put on parole or released on parole, I am calling this inquisition. Thirdly, a lot of the people that are on the streets and other people that are, let's call, supporting or protecting the Mrs. Koveshi, I will have an argument regarding this. A lot of the fight in the last years that certain of us are doing is to try to put the European laws and the European directives into place in Romania. One of the big discussions in the last days is the fact that, and I'm explaining this to you, from my point of view, the presumption of innocence in Romania was arrested and was already convicted, and there is no presumption of innocence. There is a European Union directive on this issue, and we are trying to impose it on, to take it into the Romanian laws, and we have in front of us a big fight from the DNA and other circles. Why? It's very simple. If you want democracy, if you want freedom of the speech, if you want freedom of the citizens, it's very simple. Let's take the European directives and laws and submit it into the national legislation. Why do you attack this? The international warrants. From my point of view, the international warrants and the red notices with the Interpol and the European arrest warrants are a very clear sign of where Romania is standing now. I used the term in the last period of time, I used the term Securitate 2.0. Securitate 2.0 is the former Securitate that some of us we might remember from before '89, and what is happening actually now in Romania. We are next to the Russian Federation and to Turkey in the number of international warrants. Second, we are next to the Russian Federation and to Turkey in asking to grab, to catch the opposition, even if it's political or economical, like in the case of Adamescu or his son. So this is an abuse of international warrants. The numbers are very strict and very clear. Let us look at the numbers. Let us identify the targets. And you can see right from Eastern Europe, we are the only nations that have dozens and dozens of warrants against the opposition. My message to the European Union is the fact that the European nations should understand this abuse of European warrants. Why? Because the European nations can be considered accomplices to this Romanian authorities' actions. When I said Securitate 2.0, I'm going to the most important topic of my last presentations is the collusion between the security services and the judiciary. One of the things that the people asked the most in '89 when they went out on the streets was the fact that Securitate cannot arrest, detain, prosecute, and judge people. We managed to do this. The current Romanian security services do not have this legislative possibility. But what they tried to do in the last years, with these secret protocols signed between the DNA and the security services, was actually exactly that. There are proofs in Romania that the security services were involved in the judicial process. There are proofs that the security services got involved in the real judgment, denying the right of fair trial. And there is a commission, a permanent commission of the Romanian Parliament, the control commission of the SRI, that is taking into consideration all the things. I went in front of the commission, I presented these proofs and documents. I submitted the commission a list of 65 names of people that were abused, or people that were part of this conspiracy of this parallel state that is behind a lot of the actions and cases that are currently taking place. Of course, everybody will say, maybe he's fantasizing, maybe he has a file, maybe, as the propaganda is saying, he's working for such or such or such person. I'm not. And I know, from my experience, that the arguments and the numbers are the most important. So one of the things that the Securitate 2.0 is the most clear and present in the day-to-day life of the Romanians is the large-scale, the mass-scale surveillance of the population. And here are the numbers. Between 2010 and 2015, so 5 years, first you have to know that there are two types of surveillance warrants in Romania. One is national security warrant that is obtained by the intelligence services. Second is the normal security warrant. We're talking about normal surveillance warrant. In Romania, 946 requests were asked in these 5 times, and the courts in Romania agreed to 729 applications. So in these 5 years, 729 warrants were issued. You need to be explained something else. In December, I showed to the public one of these warrants. In these warrants, there were 80 targets, 80 persons. Starting with the head of the Senate, the second person in Romania has importance, the president of the Senate, that was during that time presidential candidate, a list of 80 persons, political, economical, media, journalists, that were on that specific warrant. Second thing, the High Court of Cassation and Justice, during these 5 years, was asked to issue 4,523 warrants. they admitted 4,522. So they rejected only 1 in 5 years. As you know, in Romania there are appeal courts. The appeal courts in Cluj, Bucharest, Iași, Timișoara, Oradea, and Pitești accepted during this period 100% all the requests. So you do the numbers. This report is obtained, and this report also here contains the numbers per each request and admitted warrants. We'll go to the second issue, the issue of the national security warrants. Regarding the national security warrants, one of the persons that was interviewed by the commission in the parliament, and I'm talking about Alina Bica, the former head of the anti-mafia prosecutors, she said in front of the parliament during an investigation, I mean under oath, she said that while she was heading the DICOT, while she was actually part of the Prosecutor General, she was signing this type of warrants. And she said that there were mayors, presidents of counties, athletes, businessmen, people from the media. And she said that she signed each day between 16 and 20 mandates per day. And that as far as she remembers, usually on one warrant there were about 10 persons, 10 targets. And she said that she did this activity for about 1 year while she was in that position. And that there were 2 prosecutors from the prosecutor's office that were signing this type of warrants. So again, you can do the maths and the calculations. It's very simple. This large-scale surveillance, that warrant that I showed in December is very clear, means physical surveillance, electronic surveillance, surveillance inside the house of the targets, surveillance regarding the emails and all other type of communications. So all this large-scale surveillance that I'm presenting you, you should understand that is also touching the European citizens, because the European citizens are in contact with Romanians. The European businessmen are in contact and doing investments in Romania. So this is also an European issue. The head of the judicial section of the SRI was interviewed for about 6 hours in the parliament. His name is General Dumbrava. Among other things, he admitted that he was asked to give judicial opinion to prosecutors and to judges. So, a security service that has no right by the Constitution, and that the Constitutional Court said it very clear and loudly that is against the Constitution to be involved in this type of activities, was actually in collusion with judges and was asking the judges the penalties and the number of years that the person should be in prison or not. The request to grant or not the request of pre-trial arrests. I will give you another example that you will understand. You know, there is a Sky News reporter called Stuart Ramsey, and he made a report in Romania about 1 year ago. He was accused of organized crime, organizing a group, and he was accused of revealing information that is putting in danger the Romanian national security. Why? Because he made a show on TV, and he explained the basic line was the border between Romania and Ukraine is so porous and has problems that we might have arms going through Ukraine to Western Europe. Anyway, the quality of the show is not really up to me to decide. But the important thing is the Romanian prosecutors, they started a case against this journalist. And they asked the Rogatory Commission to the UK because he's indicted in this case actually. He's already indicted. So this is the type of activities that are done currently. More than this, when I called in Romania, when I called these activities, I call this activity torturers. Why? There is a term in Romania that sounds and is very understandable, called torționar. In English would be translated torturer. Because the torture doesn't necessarily have to be physical. The torture can be a torture against the against the family, psychological, against the family, against the business, against the employees. Because in the last years, we saw Romanian businessmen being destroyed. We saw businesses being destroyed and people let out on the streets. We saw destinies destroyed, like again, it's the case of Dana Damescu. And we saw a gulag situation. I was, again, imprisoned for 1 year and a month, let's say. Because of my military formation, I was, let's say, ready to live in those conditions that I show you in the pictures. Persons, normal persons, they are not ready. You mentioned, and I will end with this, and then we will come back if you want to discuss any specific action. You mentioned a committee that is going to come to Romania to look for the prison conditions. We are like, I don't know if you know the story of the Potemkin villages in Russia. We are exactly in that position. So if this commission is going to Romania, my first advice would be for the commission not to go and see what the authorities want to show them. Because I've been there while one of this commission came. And they set up a room, and it was very nice, and they put TV, and they put only 2 people in, and they take out the other people and putting them in a different way. And they asked us to smile, and they asked the people to smile. You can imagine that they were smiling, because if they were not smiling, they would lose a lot of the things they had granted inside. So this type of lies have to stop. And one of the most important things the gulag in Romania is not about the people that are put into prison. It's about the lack of fair trial. The lack of fair trial is very difficult to understand in the Western European society. The fact that you are in front of a judge, and that judge is actually a secret agent of the security service. The fact that behind the closed doors, a general from the security services is going to present a secret classified report to the judge and says to the judge, you cannot show this to the defendant. You cannot show this to the lawyer. You cannot show it to them. But keep in mind, we have this information and this person is guilty. And that judge is taking decision based on that. This is making Romania not a part of the European Union, but is making Romania part of a much Eastern culture of dictatorship. I will be ready to answer any of your questions, and probably there are a lot of other things we're not able to discuss. But again, David, I think, has more interesting things to say.
Thank you for your testimony. I must say it's quite frightening to hear about your experience from inside of those institutions.
Also, I will show you 2 pictures because, you know, one of the things that they are using, they are using the media in their activities. So when I was arrested, even if the Romanian directive is not allowing this, but we did not implement it. Why? That remains to be seen. They were taking pictures of me while I was arrested, then they were putting them out in the media. Why? In order to attack and to say, look, this person has no right to speak. This person is good. So I will also pass it through the table because I'm not very proud of these pictures, but in the same time they are part of my past.
Sorry, your personal history. Okay, thank you very much for sharing this horrifying experience you went through. And I will now give the floor to David Clark, political expert on Eastern Europe and former special advisor at the Foreign Office from 1997 to 2001.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that was very interesting, and it overlaps with an awful lot of what I know about the situation in Romania and have looked into personally myself. I'm here because a year ago I wrote a report for the Henry Jackson Society in the UK called Fighting Corruption with Contricks, Romania's Assault on the Rule of Law. And this caused quite a stir because although all of the information that I used was in the public domain and I'd assembled it in that way, it was the first time anyone outside Romania, any reputable think tank outside Romania, had really brought that information together and presented it in the way that I did. And the conclusion that I came to was that in Romania the anti-corruption fight had become, in a sense, a cover for political score settling and extremely serious violations of human rights that put Romania in breach of its European obligations. In essence, I was arguing that the anti-corruption fight in Romania had itself become corrupted in a very fundamental way. Now, the reactions to this were several. A lot of people welcomed it. There was a fair amount of surprise and shock, I think. My own motives were attacked by those who were unwilling to hear what I was saying. And the DNA, the Anti-Corruption Agency, made a formal referral of my report to the Superior Council of Magistracy on the basis that it constituted an attack on judicial independence, of all things. The very problem I was highlighting in my report, which I'll come on to, which is the extent to which prosecutors and politicians are undermining the rule of law and undermining judicial independence, was something that I was accused of in a startling example of what I would call Soviet-style doublethink. And the CSM eventually produced its finding, a very diluted and tangential ruling in which they, more or less without saying so, tried to imply that the DNA's assessment of my report was correct. A very clear tool of intimidation, I think, intended to be a tool of intimidation against me and against the organisation that I was writing for. Not that it particularly succeeded, because I'm not easily intimidated and I'm not within the reach, thank goodness, of those who have any ability to do me harm. But a clear indication of the mentality of the people that we're dealing with, their attitude, as demonstrated in the Stuart Ramsey case exactly, of an intolerance to anybody who questions their methods and looks closely into what they're doing. The one thing that hasn't happened a year after I wrote my report is I haven't been challenged on a single point of fact or analysis in my report. There have been plenty of ad hominem attacks on me personally, but nobody has questioned a single fact or point of analysis in my report in any way that would force me